Konnichiwa, fellow literary enthusiasts! Today, our literary voyage takes a poignant turn as we delve into pages of history. I am Rian Levy Guarda, and join me in exploring the intersection of literature and the Japanese occupation in the Philippines. Together, we'll unravel the stories, poems, and narratives that bear witness to a crucial chapter in history. Let's navigate through the words that echo the resilience and spirit of a nation during the challenging times. This is more than a literature. This is a journey through the voices that injure the echoes of the past.
The Japanese invasion of the Philippines was conducted on schedule. The first landing was made on December 8th, and during the 2 weeks following, beachheads were successfully secured at 6 points in the archipelago. The Nipponese assault troops had been well prepared for this kind of campaign. Nipponese planes began.
And now let's begin. Japanese period. Between 1941 to 1945, the development of Philippine literature was interrupted due to the Japanese colonization. There was no freedom of speech and of the press. Newspaper in English were banned by the Japanese. This became a blessing in disguise as writers started writing in Filipino. The common literary themes were nationalism, country, and life in the barrios. Also, Japanese period has been described as one of the worst period in Philippine history and literature. The events and experience of the trivalent times left permanent scars on the lives of Filipino people. However, there are a few bright spots in these otherwise dreary days. Next, historical background. The Japanese occupation. During the Japanese occupation of the Philippines, writing in English was banned, so the author switched to writing in Filipino. The Japanese government has a lot of bad feelings toward the United States, and they did everything they could to stop the Filipinos from liking the Americans. The weekly Liwayway publication, which was subject to a rigorous censorship, was placed under a rigorous monitoring and administered by a Japanese individual called Ishiwara. The Japanese language was brought into the Filipino, but the people of the Philippines didn't take it well, despite the fact that the Japanese compelled them to learn it. Filipino literature has a break as a result of the restriction on writing in English. In vernacular language, many Filipino authors wrote plays, poetry, short stories, and novels. Nihongo was also introduced to the Filipinos, but it was not well accepted because it was taught to them by force. Literature during the Japanese occupation in the Philippines. During the Japanese occupation in the Philippines, the predominant themes of most poems were nationalism, country, love and life in the barrios, faith, religions, and the arts. There are also 3 types of poems emerged during the Japanese occupation in the Philippines: haiku, karaniwang anyo or usual form, and tangka. But first, we will be talking about haiku. A haiku is a poem in free verse of Japanese origin. It has 17 syllables divided into 3 lines. The first has 5 syllables, the second has 7, and the third has 5 syllables. And now, we will be talking about karaniwang anyo or usual form. It is a traditional poems, and one of the examples are the Tanaga and Ambahan of pre-colonial. Since the Filipinos didn't learn Japanese, they keep using the old ways to write literary work, which included flourishing the Tanaga and Ambahan. And lastly is Tangka. A Tangka poem is very similar to a haiku, but Tangka poems have more syllables and they use simile, metaphors, and personification. Tangka poems are written about nature, seasons, love, sadness, and other strong emotion. To add more info about tangka, the tangka has 31 syllables and are divided into 5 lines, with the first line with 5 syllables, the second line with 7 syllables, the third line with 5, and the fourth and fifth line with 7 syllables. Here is an example of haiku. Chapters intertwined, our shared story unfolds bright. Life with you, my guide. And an example of tangka. In my own embrace, whispers of self-love resound. Unfolding each day, I am my own sanctuary, champion of my own heart. Next is Filipino drama during the Japanese period. The drama experienced a lull during the Japanese period because movie houses showing American films were closed. Many of the plays were reproduction of English plays in Tagalog. There are 3 translators, and these are Francisco Soc Rodriguez, Narciso Pimentel, and Alberto Concho. They also founded the organization of Filipino players named Dramatic Philippines. Few of the playwriters were Jose Maria Hernandez, who wrote Panday Pira, Francisco Soc Rodrigo, Sa Pula sa Puti, Clodoaldo del Mundo wrote Bulaga, and Julian Cruz Balmaceda, who wrote Sino Ba Kayo, Dahil sa Anak, and Higante ng Patay. Second to the last is Filipino short stories during the Japanese occupation. First, let's analyze short stories during this period. During this period, the field of the short stories widened during the Japanese occupation. Many wrote short stories, among them were Brigido Batong Bakal, Macario Pineda, Serafin Ginigundo, Liwayway Arceo, Narciso Ramos, and V.M. Gonzalez, Alicia Lopez Lim, Ligaya Perez, and Gloria Guzman. Also, the best writing in 1945 were selected by a group of judges composed of Francisco Icasiano, Jose Esperanza Cruz, Antonio Rosales, Clodoaldo del Mundo, and Teodoro Santos. As a result of this selection, the following got the first 3 prizes. First prize, Narciso Reyes with his Lupang Tinubuan. Second prize, Liwayway Arceo's Uhaw ang Tigang na Lupa. And third prize, V.M. Gonzalez, Lungsod Nayon at Dagat-Dagatan. Lupang Tinibuan ni Narciso Reyes. It won unang gantimpala at he was known as the pinakamahusay na akda noong 1945. Pumunta si Danting sa probinsya ng kanyang ama at kinilala niya ang kanyang mga kabag-anak at lugar. Next is Philippine literature and English. Due to the tight restriction placed by the Japanese on the authoring and publication of works in English, the English language literature of the Philippines went through a dark period. The few individuals who dared to write so far survived or propaganda. A notable writer of the period was Carlos P. Romulo, who won the Pulitzer Prize for his bestseller, I Saw the Fall of the Philippines, I See the Philippines Rise, and His Mother America, and My Brother Americans. In this period, there are actually a lot of writers and journalists, and these include Salvador P. Lopez, who is a Filipino writer, journalist, educator, diplomat, and statesman. Next is Leon Marea Guerrero, a Filipino diplomat and novelist, and was one of the foremost Filipino nationalists of his era. Raul Manglapos, a newspaperman and literary writer. Carlos Bulusan, Filipino novelist and poet who emigrated to the United States on July 1, 1930. Nick Joaquin, who produced The Woman Who Looked Like Lazarus. Carlos Bulusan, who wrote The Laughter of My Father in 1994, The Voice of Bataan in 1943, and 6 Filipino poets in 1942. Also, Alfredo Lituatco published With Harp and Sling, and in 1943, Jose P. Laurel published Forces That Make a Nation Great. The Commonwealth Literary Awards gave prizes to meritorious writers. That's it! That's the Japanese period. Thank you for joining me in this long journey. I am Rian Lee Viguarda, your host for today's discussion. Thank you and have a great day ahead.